Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Rewind, where today a very, very annoying thing has kind of come to light for me. Now, I know many of you out there on the internet are enjoying the somewhat farcical and somewhat almost satisfying delusion of OpenClaw. Why do I call it delusional? Well, I was messing about with it yesterday. In fact, I was just messing about with it last night. And what I found was rather disgruntling, to say the least. What I found with OpenClaw was very interesting. Basically, there's a lot of CVEs within it, which allows things for prompt injection. It allows for things like data stealing, your keys being exfiltrated, and all this sort of thing. So for those of you who are not in security, think of it like this. You have this system on the internet, right, called OpenClaw, which allows you to integrate into things like Spotify, your emails, and your Gmail, all that kind of stuff, right? WhatsApp, Telegram, and then you get to the point where it's like you want to be productive, and then because it's out on the internet, right, because to get this to work, you more or less have to have it on the internet, unless you have, downloaded your cryptographic keys for certificates. So in other words, you think of that little padlock, and then that padlock basically is a representation of the SSL essentially being working, which means that the certificates are in place, in the correct place, right? So you have that going on, right? So you feel safe. But there are things within the code which are just like... I'm sure that's going to get clipped, but okay. So if we go to my display... Whoa, infinite money glitch. Let's go back to my display. Let's see, which one is it? Not that one. That one. There we go. There we go. There we go. Display one without camera. That's the one I meant. And this is just one of the vulnerabilities, by the way. So this is saying that you can exfiltrate data through something called the WebSocket. Now, when I was messing about with this yesterday, one of the things that really annoyed me was the fact that there's something called an origin, right? So you have to allow insecure in your OpenClaw.json file and basically set where the origin is set to. And this is from something called the Gateway UI server. So this is what you interact with. Now, I found this comical because essentially when I was using OpenClaw, one of the things that really frustrated me was not even the fact that the origin was a problem, right? The thing that annoyed me, and what's annoying a lot of the internet, is just the UI. I sat down, and you'll see this in multi-tech spec if you go to my other channel. One of the things that really annoyed me was just the UI design. I was running this in an Ubuntu virtual machine via VMware, and one of the things that really frustrated me was the fact that I couldn't go back. Like, if I wanted to go back on the user interface, I had to escape or Control-C to break the script. And more annoyingly, I have to go through and rerun the entire Docker container. And this is how I know it was a vibe-coded application, because I shouldn't need to do that. But the thing that was more worrying to me was the fact that it's using env... Well, it has something called docker setup.sh, which is a script that it runs for Docker setup. And then when I went to the releases, I went to releases of OpenClaw. So if I go to OpenClaw here, for example, this is one of the things that's interesting, but this is not the one that I wanted. So if I go back to OpenClaw here, and if I go to releases, you'll see one of the things that really just blew my mind away. So I go to OpenClaw. There we go, releases from yesterday, right? So one was released yesterday, so this is probably a patch fix or vulnerability fix. Yeah, so this is this has a lot of things in it, right? So onboarding tools, ACP, plugin, SDK fixes, and hopefully this fixes some of the vulnerabilities as well. Okay, now they've got a few more guardrails. Oh, here we go. Dangerously allowed. So card names. This tie loopback origin dev device to allow actual local socket non-host header claims and explicitly warns metrics when website fallback accepts website origins. Hard and safe regex detection. Okay, that's a really good step in the right direction, by the way. A really good step in the right direction. So it's looking for glob patterns. So what does that mean? So I'm just looking at this new one, and basically one of the things that's very interesting here is that they're actually making an effort, so that way if you type in an arbitrary string, so basically like, you know, like this water bottle has all this text on here, right? When you type stuff in, you know, it comes up like AQA, for example, whatever. Those are what are called characters. And then the string itself is denoted like a speech mark. So it's like you're talking speech, like I'm talking just now, into the computer. And by having these patterns be hardened, so that way, you know, you can't run these particular injections or, you know, weird text inside of these scripts, right? Because a lot of OpenClaw is TypeScript based, which is another clue that it's a Vive coded project, by the way. That is actually a step in the right direction. So let's go through some of these notes that was released from yesterday. So we have plain text validation. Okay, cool. Loopback only by default. It wasn't when I last used it yesterday, but maybe on the new version it is. Let's see, Mac OS X, media, HTTP proxy. Okay, some good stuff in here. But anything around CVEs? Not necessarily. Security audits. Okay, hardening now. Okay, security prompt injections. Ironic, given how many CVEs there are to the system. And I suspect that this is an emergency response to some of the CVEs, by the way. But this is the entire kind of change log from yesterday, which is a good effort, to be honest. There's a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of contributors. But here's one of the other things that was really annoying. So you get like all these zip files. Okay, well this is for the release, right? But why is it when I go to releases, right? When I click on here, and I want to see, for example, never mind this. There's one bit in here that really just, it was the Docker container. I'm looking for the Docker container. Maybe they changed it, but they kind of changed it in a day. But anyway, there's a Docker container which you can use here, right? What is going on here? OpenClaw, sponsor this project deployment. Okay, OpenClaw for the package. Here you go, here. This is the bit that I didn't understand, right? So I spent a lot of time looking for that, but here's the thing, right? Last published 1 hour ago. You see how it says gcr.io OpenClaw main? Can someone please explain to me at OpenClaw why on earth, when I go to Docker Compose file, I have to go back and rebuild the entire container every time? Like, I know you have the Docker files directly in the Compose file. I get that. But what if I just want to pull it from the GitHub registry? And then just add my env in there. Why can't I do that? Like, that's the way it's supposed to be done. Like, every single token that I want to be adding in there, right, should be obfuscated, and it was in plain text. Like, if I had a shoulder surfer, right, somebody was observing me, right, and I didn't have a privacy screen or anything, they could just see that token and be like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm just going to take a picture, you know, a selfie. And then they would take that token, write it into their application, right, which could be my Claude API token that I paid for, right, and now somebody can do some malicious attacks with it. I found that bizarre. I just could not understand how an application that has such significance in society does that sort of stuff. Like, what is going on? And the other things I want to point out here as well, and this is the reason why I just do not like this system, is not only this as a potential vector. So this is CVE 2026 25253. This is one that I found out about only through Gemini, and this was quite interesting. That basically, like, you can exfiltrate data based upon the WebSocket hijacking. So that's basically, well, okay. Basically, this is how it works. So your browser executes the attack in Java. So you have a JavaScript page which is running. So for those of you not technical, think of it as just like a way in which you serve information, like you're at the restaurant, and then you kind of just pick the thing that you like the best, basically. And this is basically what it's doing. But instead of giving you the food, it's kind of saying, right, here's some rotten food. Here you go. Essentially, that's kind of what it's doing without checking the integrity. And yeah, this is what's happening, right? So as of yesterday, there were some critical vulnerabilities. So if I go back to that article, which is a really good read, by the way, it's dark reading. It talks about some of the severities in here. And one of the things that was really interesting was this growing list. This growing list of CVEs. And people are saying, oh yeah, you know, we're using it. It's making us more productive. Hey, look at me. I'm doing this stuff called lead generation using OpenClaw. And it's making my life better. Really? Really? These CVEs that you see here, they're making your life better. I'm no Lewis Rossman. And I'm no Eli the computer guy. But I think I can speak to everybody when I say that this is BS. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not making your life better. This is making it significantly worse. This is vibe-coded BS on a scale which we've never seen before. This is fundamentals gone awry, right? I can't even keep a straight face. This is hilarious to me. You know, because people like me are being shunted from the industry, and then I see this stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, this is it's just like, come on, dude, like, seriously. And we talked about this in 2 episodes, right? Whereby, you know, 250. Oh yeah, like, you know, AI is not going to take over your job because it already made 500 git requests. Only 45% were accepted. I wonder why, bro. Look at this. Look at this stuff. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4 CVEs already. Already, it's not even been 3 months, bro. Not even been 3 months. The most starred project on GitHub, of course it will be, using React JavaScript and React JavaScript libraries. Yeah, because everybody thinks it's making their lives better. And I'll show the install on multi-tech spec channel, and you'll see it really is garbage. It's garbage. It's just vibe-coded BS. Like, I had a comment the other day as well, and some guy was saying, like, you know, oh, like, I don't agree that, you know, sorry, not even on YouTube. This was on LinkedIn. Forget YouTube. YouTube is fine, but on LinkedIn, somebody, I had a founder argue with me, this 23-year-old guy, saying that, oh, if you're thinking that AI is not keeping your stuff secure, then, you know, you've got another thing coming because now you're living in the Stone Age because now you're doing it by hand. No, I want to be clear on this. Software engineers have been doing this for years. This is not new to us. This is not new, right? Software engineers for the longest amount of time, if they're decent software engineers, have been looking at security throughout most or if not all the entire chain, going from supply chain attacks, right? Which was when we had the pip problem, the sci-fi problem, right? Due to rogue packages, right? We've been looking at things like how do we deploy our programs safely and efficiently through things like pipelines. We have been looking at how do we ensure that cost is being used efficiently. We've looked at so many different factors that this sort of stuff is non-surprising. Let's just be honest. So yeah, 1 second, I got somebody at the door. So yeah, essentially, like I was saying, this is not new to us. This is basically something which is taught to us at a very, very young age. And I mean, when I was going to some of these meetups, right, when I was a young engineer, one of the things that was taught to me was the power of encryption, which is something that's severely lacking in this project. So one of the things that we were talked about was Lux encryption for the disk. And this was like a contractor that I met at one of these events. And it was very, very interesting because it talked about, like, well, companies can try and, like, you know, take things from my laptop and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, And he just turned around and said, yeah, I just put Lux encryption on it and nobody's going to get into it. I was like, the kahunas, shall we say, on this guy. And it was just a very, very fun time for me because, I was you're aspiring at engineer and you know that these people are working for some of the best companies in the world. And when you talk to these guys, it's pretty interesting. It's very, very interesting. But right now, a lot of them are kind of thinking, oh, well, okay, people are jacking up prices. This whole AI thing is making us kind of like a little bit scared and everything. I'm like, yeah, like when I see, vibe coded stuff like this and then lots of people are using it, then I get scared. Yeah. I mean, come on, who wouldn't be? But let's have a look at some of these kind of, other things which are going on. Like, what is this talking about? Connection oriented. OpenClaw's incorrect assumption that any connection originates from localhost. Yeah, that is a problem. That is a problem. I saw it as 127.0.0.1, which would be the loopback address as opposed to localhost, which in itself is a little bit problematic. A little bit. But it's not like that bad. I've used it before with things like health checks, for example, so that's not really a problem. But everything originating from localhost is a little bit problematic. When I did this yesterday, I used my local IP address. It was Class C bound, and I was still stuck in awe as to how on earth, right? If I go back to, I'll show you this thing. This is just weird to me. Look, see? Control UI requires device identity. Use HTTPS or localhost secure context. What? What do you mean? I'm hosting on this IP address. This is an internal Class C IP address, right? 192.13.51 with a port address of all things. And somehow I need to have HTTPS or localhost. Why? You're already bound to 0.0.0.0, and I put your bug fix in there as well. Right? Look at this. Right? Here we go. This is for the JSON, the OpenClaw JSON thing, right? And it said, oh, right, put all this stuff in, right? You put 127. Blah, 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 and then your IP address. Well, why can't I just have it as my IP address? Like, why do I need the allowed origin as 127.0? Like, what? Didn't really understand that, but I can kind of get it from the Docker perspective, maybe because it's utilizing that as the port to be open on the socket, on the Docker socket, which is again quite dangerous. So that was one thing that I learned about this, is that it has this idea of, okay, well, if I use Docker in Docker, which is opening up the var socket, then I'm okay for sandboxing, which seems to have proved to be futile, especially when I look at some of these things which are going on. So because of the OpenClaw system processes data from untrusted sources, which can include email, web pages, and documentation, for example, attempts at prompt injection are quite easy on the platform. Yeah, because when I think about it, you are giving that information over to somebody like Anthropic and somebody like OpenAI, right? You're giving it to train these LLMs, right? So you're giving away that information for basically no reason. And the problem with it that I have with OpenClaw is that if you want to use it this manner, wouldn't it have been more effective to use something like Hugging Face and then download the models locally? That makes a lot of sense, right? Because now we're keeping all of that information internal. We know what's going on with those models. They're not going to go back up to the cloud for the processing. It's kept all internal. At that point, I'm trusting the system more because this is a local model, right? This is running on my system. Why would I want my information to go up to, a third-party provider only for it to be used against me? And it's training that model. Then people will turn around and say, oh, but it's not being used for training and blah, blah, blah. Like, we have it all in contracts and stuff like that. How do you think they made art? How do you think they understand what the code means? And you have a private GitHub repository. Because because people have asked for your permission to get that data. But anyway, let's see. The company researchers OpenClaw in isolated virtual instances and were concerned about how easy the AI could go off the rails. Yeah. I mean, come on. It's prompt injection is a vulnerability inside of AI anyway. It makes no difference. You can't close up prompt injection vulnerability attacks because you need to prompt the AI to do things. Hence the term inference, inferring the data. Right? People really need to understand this. Compromise in a heartbeat, we already talked about that. The new vulnerable supply chain. Oh. Oh. This is what I was talking about. Public Skills Registry, Claw Hub. There we go. Yeah, it's such a significant danger. Oh, this is not new, man. This is not new. This is funny. This is funny to me. I mean, come on. What was this one? OpenClaw versions privacy media tokens could reference local file paths. Okay, that's dangerous. And would stage and send as attachments. Wow. If an agent can be influenced to emit a media token. Okay, so media token, what they're saying there is essentially you write the word media, and then you want to have like a file being added to it. Excuse me. Then that could be problematic. It looks like it's been fixed though, because there seems to be a npm OpenClaw package which has fixed it, which is good. And of course, this is going through the TypeScript verification. So basically, when OpenClaw came out, and this is the one thing that is kind of annoying, they don't add, like, people turn around and say, oh yeah, you know, we'll use AI agents for blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, you will, but the problem is, right, you need to take into account what the code is doing. So like, you can vibe code an app, that's all very well and good. If you don't understand what the code is doing, you're kind of toast. You need to at least understand the architecture. Yeah? And this is a clear example of that. This is one of the other CVEs that I looked at, by the way. And then we have, you know, command injection bugs. Command injection bugs, that's quite funny. 2.3, I think we talked about this one already, but it looks like it's still active. Was there a known fix for it? References to a virus solutions and tools. By selecting... no, it's still in MITRE. Jesus. It was a good man, by the way. Damn, is it still in MITRE? It hasn't got a CVSS version 4 score yet, but... this does not necessarily endorse views expressed with one code. Okay, yeah, fine. Click one-click RC to steal your multibot data and keys. Whoa. Okay. Yeah, fine. You. Oh, okay. It references this thing. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So this was one of the attack vectors that came out, which was quite interesting. So if you're a red team researcher, this would be like gold dust to you. But essentially, what's this saying? I think this was talking about URL, gateway URL query parameter in the URL and persists to its storage. For example, localhost.com would save attacker.com as a new gateway URL. Oh wow! So you can redirect the URL in app settings TS. Blindly accepts a gateway URL parameter. Oh geez. Okay. So this is kind of where I think it gets a bit strange, because that basically means that you can redirect the gateway UI. So that thing that we saw before, right? This could be redirected in the heartbeat. That is some freaky stuff. So now an attacker has access to all of my stuff, and oh wow, okay. Let's see. So it's a one-click remote execution exploit, which, with this exploit, a single visit to a malicious website was enough to hack your computer and AI assistant. Wow. Okay, so how do they do it? So they said change. So this must be like a post request and then going to this particular string. Right, yeah. That's basically what it is, yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So basically they're doing a post to this, basically. So if you're doing a post request, and then you basically inject this, right? So this is like an arbitrary string. So this is a key value pair inside of the app settings TS file. So this is the TypeScript file. And you put that key value pair in, and it will run that script on the server and then arbitrarily change it without checking the headers. That is insane. Like, oh, this is fundamental stuff. Like, if you're serving it in-house, right? if you're serving the application in-house, right? OpenClaw in-house, yeah? Wouldn't you want some security to say, right, okay, not everything should be exposed out to the internet or even, like, taken as parameters for this thing to be set up? Like, that is just, wow. So you're telling me I can, so what is this? All right, so this, okay, yeah, so this is running gateway URL. So we have a variable called gateway URL, and it gets a parameter called gateway URL, right? This could be from an environment variable. This could be from anywhere, right? But basically, it's defined within the TypeScript program, which will be like a const thing, right? So, or it will say env gateway URL equals, you know, os.env.blah, blah, blah, right? Something like that. So we can see that it says, right, it's not equal to null. And if it's not equal to null, in other words, it's not completely empty, right? So if you're a layman watching this, it means it's like it's not completely empty, but null is like, yeah, it doesn't exist sort of thing. As opposed to being empty, because I think of it as the toilet roll meme. And editor, if you're watching this, like, put that in, please. If gateway URL and gateway URL is not equal to the host settings gateway URL, then we are applying the new host. So in other words, why are we calling this twice? Like, if gateway URL and gateway URL is not equal to the host gateway URL, why? Like, what's the point of calling this twice? Why not just call it once if we're using the same variable? Like, what are we doing here? Shouldn't this be gateway URL raw? Oh, sorry. Okay. Gateway URL is equal to gateway URL trim. Right. Okay. So if gateway URL, which is where? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why are we using the same name to define a gateway URL? All right. Never mind. First thing, app lifecycle TS triggers connect gateway immediately after the settings change. Okay, so this is running a function, and then inside of that function, we are putting something in called host. Okay, cool. Protocol execution, gateway.ts automatically bundles the security-sensitive auth token into the system's connection handshake to the new URL. Oh, what bundles this security-sensitive auth token into the system's connection? Oh wow. Okay. So what are you telling me that this is done in plain text? No way. In isolation, each one of these operations are saved. However, the depth first scan recognized that together these operations create a critical security issue. Yeah, that's one way. That's being polite. Our engine flagged the dangerous pattern. Our engine. Okay. Clicking a URL can force a connection and leak the authentication token to an attacker. Fair enough. I mean, you detected it. So what would you say is the solution then? The UI should only connect to trusted gateways that require explicit confirmation. Okay, so the answer is when the WebSocket is connected, make sure it's trusted. Hello. Maltbot WSCat. Okay, so we're looking to see. Oh, wow. I noticed something like this in my OpenClaw file, by the way. My OpenClaw.json file, and that made me worried because it was basically the same as having the env file. So why do we need an OpenClaw.json file, like if it's the same as the env file, and that should not be pushed anyway, and it's being made in the docker-setup.sh file? I didn't understand that when I was installing the system, by the way. It was just like, what is going on? It does not work locally on locally running OpenClaw instances. This is bad enough, but this direct exploitation method has 3 limitations. It does not bypass any defensive sandboxing or safety guardrails. Then why not just have the sandbox as default? As default execution. Then you limit the blast radius, surely. Here's how I overcame 3 limitations and demonstrated this vulnerability can be weaponized to achieve one-click execution. Most users run OpenClaw on localhost, and as a result, this... Yeah, okay, that makes sense, yeah. If you're running it on localhost, that means you're running it locally on the system, which is binded to a socket. So this is a bit like saying, right, okay, for local development, that works absolutely fine. As soon as you start putting that on the internet, that's not going to work. Valid token. However, I found a bug to bypass this, otherwise frustrating restriction. Even if an attacker has a valid OAuth token, they can't access the victim's local OpenClaw. Well, that's pretty good. The string restriction, I would say it's pretty good, well safeguarded if it's frustrating you. Regularly, attacker.com can't make arbitrary client-side requests to localhost. This is because of the same origin policy. Yeah, that's what I ran into the other day, and that's what we saw with the bug, right? Where we put that OpenClaw.json bug fix, right, to say that the origins were allowed, the same origins, and that's what we're basically bypassing using the authenticity. Maybe I just need to put 127. Blah 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 into the system, and then it'll say, right, okay, yeah, like you're using that to suggest the loopback address with the port number, and therefore because it's coming from there, then it's all good basically. So it references the Docker container in the backend, and maybe that's the reason why it didn't work. But it's still kind of annoying to have that though. This allows me to perform cross-site WebSocket hijack. Okay. I can run Java on the victim's computer. I found that OpenClaw's WebSocket server fails to validate the WebSocket origin header. Yeah, I kind of did as well. Accepting any request from any site. Wow. Wow, okay. Escaping the sandbox. OpenClaw has robust safety features to limit risks from agent-side threats. By default, it uses exec approvals.json to prompt the user before running dangerous commands. And it can be configured to run in shell tools inside a containerized sandbox. Yeah, but I would think that that should be the default. This was something that I didn't really understand. Because if I look at the code... do I have the code available to me? So that was one thing that was interesting, because this is all the provided mvars. But if I go back to open... no, I don't need to do that. I should be a file here called Docker, I think. Docker image ingest, that's end-to-end testing. Where'd it go? Okay, fine. Go to OpenClaw, and then in here there's a Docker compose YAML. And this is the bit that really kind of blindsided me. Where are you? You're in here, aren't you? Docker compose. Where's the compose file? Okay, I'll come back in a second. Okay, it's a bit later on, and I'm just looking through this again, and it looks like, yeah, there's a few things in here. So exec approval, so to escape the... Whoa, you can escape the sandbox as well, okay. However, the protections are managed via the API itself. Because a stolen token grants operator admin... Oh, wow, okay, admin access. I don't need to find a vulnerability in the sandbox implementation to bypass it. I can rely the API to disable the feature. Okay, escaping the container. I send a config.patch request to the tools.exec.host to gateway. This forces the agent to run commands directly on the host machine, not inside Docker. Wow, okay. Okay, interesting. And then you have that one-click RC that we talked about, whereby you can change the... Okay, because you can change the domain. Yeah, right. Yeah, because you can change the domain. That is crazy. For 8080. What do you get back? Oh, wow. So, for those of you who are looking at this, basically you can run commands on the host. So basically you're saying, right, okay, I can put hacked, for example, inside of the TMP file. That's a pretty big vulnerability, to be honest. I mean, that's operating system level at that point, and then you've got a compromised host. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty bad. But apparently it's been addressed, which is good, in the GitHub advisory, and they're moving it up from version 2026.01. So in other words, from the January version, if you've got the new version, apparently it's been upgraded. But it's still quite remarkable, like how many vulnerabilities there are in this system, negating the fact that the GUI was not great. But yeah, it's a lot of vulnerabilities. I mean, yeah, I would be uncomfortable using this system, knowing that there's that many vulnerabilities. Right, 4 different vulnerabilities at the same time. Yeah, it's asking for trouble, to be honest. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope that it's giving you some value, and I'll see you in the next one.